Okay, so this is the second part of the purchasing process, systems flowchart. So reminder, what we just did in the previous portion of the video is we created a flowchart which describes all the steps and interactions that happen from preparing the purchase requisition to converting the purchase requisition to the purchase order and to transmitting the purchase order to the vendor. So, and after that, things are largely outside of our control. So we have to wait until the goods will be shipped by the supplier. So now we're assuming that the goods are here, and we're going to go through the second part of this process, receipt of the inventory. And I have created actually the symbol, which is not part of the standard flowchart symbol library in the Word, but it's the standard symbol for inventory, for physical goods. So you can see it looks like a dolly with the box on it, right? Okay. So let's get started. This flowchart will be somewhat simpler than the previous one that we created. So let's get started. Inventory receipt. This is the part where the purchasing process happens in the warehouse when the goods are delivered from the vendor to the warehouse. So therefore, I can actually reuse the initiator of this process is the vendor. So I can reuse the that symbol is called terminator, but it's also used for the starting as a starting point. Okay, so the vendor sends us the physical goods. So therefore, over here, I'm gonna have an arrow linking vendor with physical goods. There you go. Okay. When the goods are unloaded in the receiving dock, a warehouse employee, so receiving department, opens the box and locates the packing slip. So that means that actually the goods come together with the document packing slip. And if you remember from about a month ago, we have used the special symbol for the document, which is right here. Okay, so I'm gonna say, I'm gonna put the symbol document here again. So this is a packing slip. Whoops. Packing slip, and again I'm gonna have to make it black. Okay, packing slip. So what's a packing slip? All right, here, packing slip is a document generated by the sender, in this case the vendor. It lists items shipped and their quantity. So in other words, it displays quite simply the content of the package, of the box, of the delivery, whatever it is you're receiving. So really what I'm getting from the vendor are these two things: a packing slip and goods that come with the packing slip. Okay, excellent. First, the employee verifies that items and quantities listed on the packing slip match the content of the box. So verification is done manually, right? So for example, if I'm opening the box and I see 60 Rode helmets, then all I have to do really is to count the helmets inside the box, and if I have 60, that's it. That means that there is a match. Okay, this is the manual process, right? So it's not done using the computer or anything. So this is a low-tech process. So here I'm gonna create this manual process, verify that physical goods correspond to packing slip. Oops. Oh god. I'm gonna have to type it again. Verify. This computer has funky touchpad. Verify that physical goods correspond to packing slip. Okay, so this process, let me put it right here, and there should be a connector pointing to that manual process. Okay, so that's first step. After the verification, the employee scans the purchase order barcode printed out on the packing slip, and the barcode reader sends the purchase order number to the ERP system. ERP system reads the details of the purchase order from the corporate database and presents a screen to an employee where he can enter items received with their quantities. Okay, so few things going on here. When we're using the barcode scanner, we are this is an input process, right? So barcode scanner is actually a computer device. So therefore, and the idea behind this process is actually input, right? So therefore we have to use, well, I'm gonna reuse actually one of these things right here. So I'm gonna have to copy and paste right here. Okay, so and I'm gonna say scan bar purchase order barcode, PO barcode. So again, we're assuming that this is a, well, relatively high-tech operation. So when the package, the goods come in, I'm opening up the packing slip, and packing slip was prepared by the vendor. So I'm assuming that when vendor was prepping up my packing slip, it actually referred the vendor put a reference to my purchase order number that was generated by me, by the buyer. And not only they printed that as a number, as the purchase order ID, but they also encoded that in the form of the barcode. Okay, so here I'm gonna say, well, I'm taking the packing slip as an input to this process, and I'm scanning that into the system. So after the verification is done, scan the barcode into the computer, and the barcode reader sends the purchase order number to the system, ERP system right here, our next actor in this flowchart. ERP system reads the details of the purchase order from the corporate database and presents a screen where the employee can enter items received and their quantities. So therefore, I have to duplicate the corporate database right here. Okay, I'm gonna put it somewhere here. And since computer needs to get the purchase order ID from the code and read from the database, then I'm gonna have the one-way process, right? So read purchase order details, present, display, display inventory, entry screen. Okay, so I need to create a few connectors here. So of course my reader presents the PO ID from the scanning. Alright, and here I need a double-headed arrow, right? Because we're using the PO ID into the to look up the purchase order details and read them back, okay, from the database. Okay, and after that we need to show on the screen the details, not the details, but the option where the employee can enter the quantities received. So I need another arrow like this. I'm gonna make it a little bit different here. Okay, so let's see, inventory, receipt, entry screen. All right, let me make it a little bit bigger like this. Okay, so what happens after that is actually, so let's go ahead and read and put it on the picture what happens after that. Note that employee cannot see the details of the purchase order. That was actually discussed, if you remember, in the previous lecture when we talked about the database structure and about internal controls. This is something that's called access control, not the application control, but access control. So what's the meaning of this access control? If I am the person working in the receiving department and I'm scanning things, entering what I received, I should be able to only enter what I have received. So I don't know how many units are ordered on the on that purchase order originally. Okay, I have no idea. All I know is who is the vendor who sent these items and how many of each item I have inside the box. That's all I have. I don't see any inventory record. So the system essentially offers me only an option, only an opportunity to enter what I have received and how many units specifically. I don't know how many units were ordered originally, what was the price. None of that is visible for me. Okay, so this is again done for the control purposes. This is one of the internal controls, making sure that employees do not steal inventory. You receive, you record precisely what you receive. That's it, nothing else. Okay, so where are we? An employee proceeds to enter items and their quantities on the computer screen using mouse and keyboard. So therefore, I need to replicate the keying process right here. So I'm gonna make it a little bigger. Enter items received and their quantities. Okay, and I need to link the screen with keying process. So physically it means that I'm looking at the I'm using the keyboard and mouse to type literally item 0157 5 units, item 0119 7 units, etc. Okay, all right. So upon completion, the employee clicks the submit button and the ERP system records the inventory receipt, updates the quantity on hand for the items received, generates and prints the stock receipt notice. That's another document. Alright, so that means that I have another process really right here. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate this symbol and I'm gonna make it bigger. So once the items are entered, I need an arrow saying now we need to invoke a program, and the program records, let's see, where is that? ERP system records inventory receipt. Okay, so record inventory receipt, update on hand quantities, generate stock receipt notice. All right. So for that, I need a connection with a database with a double headed arrow, and the reason is very simple. Pretty much same as what we did in the previous flowchart right here. First, when the employee enters the quantities and items, I need to make sure that my database records the fact that I received 5 units of item 1, 6 units of item 2, 15 units of item 3, etc., etc. So we're recording. After that, this is an event. Every time when we record something in the database in response to an external delivery, in that case, right? That's an event. So after all these things were recorded, the receipt of the inventory, now we need to generate a summary of what we have received. And that summary, of course, is linked with the original purchase order. And receipt, because it's a separate event from the purchase order, it receives its own event ID in the database. So all this information the receipt ID, the items, their quantities, who is the vendor, what was the original purchase order that this receipt is related to. It's all read back from the database, and the program, after that the ERP system, forms the report and prints it out for the in the receiving department. So therefore I have to have another document. Okay, so over here I'm gonna have and it's called stock receipt notice. Stock receipt notice. To make it bigger. Alright. And that is generated by this computer process. So I have to have an arrow right here. Okay. After that, the goods are placed on the shelves in the warehouse, and the packing slip and the stock receipt notice are filed. And I have a lot of typos here. Alright, are filed in the chronologically organized paper file. Well, here's what I'm going to do actually. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the physical. This is the symbol for the physical goods, right? So physical goods after the let's see, after the stock receipt notice is generated. Okay. Actually I can put it right here, right? After I enter things and the notice is printed, that's when I take my, let me put it right here on the side somewhere to make it look pretty. Yeah. So after I enter all the quantities, all the items and their quantities, I have to take the goods and place them in the warehouse. So therefore I have to go ahead and terminate this process right here by saying goods go to the warehouse. Alright, and I'm gonna create a link like that. Alright, but stock receipt notice and the original packing slip, they go into the paper folder. Well, for that actually I'm going to use a different document, so let me erase that document, because there are really two paper forms that I'm filing, right? The packing slip and my report of the received items. I'm gonna use another symbol which looks like document, but they're all stacked together, so it's a multi-document symbol. So there you go. And I'm going to say over here it's the packing slip, and of course I need, whoa, okay, packing, and I need to make it black, packing slip, and also stock receipt notice. Okay, let me make it bigger. So this packing slip existed before, but stock receipt notice was printed out. Okay, so I take these two documents and I file them in the paper folder. So if you remember from our discussion of the flowchart symbols, paper folder is an upside down triangle like that. Okay, so we're going to well, first we need to make sure it's transparent, and so these are the inventory receipt documents. Okay, and of course I need to make it look like that. Inventory, so receipt documents. Alright, so all of my documents go into this folder, and because it's chronologically organized, if you remember, what I need to do is I have to add sort of an area right here and insert. Unfortunately, Word doesn't have the standard symbol, flowchart symbol for the paper folder, so I'm kind of have to improvise here a little bit. I'm going to insert one of the shapes and the shape would be, oh god, where is the text box? Let's see, would it be better if I make it bigger? Shapes. Yeah, right there, text box. Okay, so C stands for chronological organization, right? So, and for that to look more or less human, I have to say no fill, and I have to say no outline. That becomes transparent, and I can move it right here and make it uppercase actually. Alright, so this is the flow chart for the second part of the process, and that would be receiving operation. Okay, so inventory receipt happens when the vendor brings in the inventory, and we have to accept inventory, record the inventory, and keep the paperwork that comes with that, and place the goods physically on the shelves. Okay, so this is it for the documentation of the inventory of the purchase order process. Now, you may notice that we didn't document the process in its entirety. So we created flowcharts for purchase requisition and purchase order, and it's sent to the vendor. Next step is goods come in, we place them in the warehouse, but the last piece of the puzzle is when we receive the invoice from the vendor. We record the invoice, and we later send the payment on the invoice. So I'm not gonna do this last couple of parts myself. Instead of that, probably I'm going to put that either on the practice problem or maybe on the upcoming quiz. Okay, so we'll have to create the system's flow chart for the remaining part of the purchase to pay process. So this is the end of our purchasing chapter, and in the next lecture we're going to start looking at sales and distribution. So we're going to start with SAP. Actually, we're going to go through a fairly straightforward exercise when we receive the sales order from our customers, when we have to record the sales order, and we have to do the picking and packing in the warehouse. Then we have to put everything in the box with the packing slip, because now we are the vendor, so we create the packing slip, add that on the top of the goods in the box, and then we ship the box to the customers. After that, we create the invoice, send it to the customers, and when the payment is received, we collect the we record the payment, and that concludes actually the second pretty popular, pretty important process, which is sales to cash process. So this is it, and next lecture I'm also going to record and post on the YouTube.